I want you to do me a favor. Close your eyes for a second. You're leaving school, you just walk past the Got Milk poster with Hannah Montana on it. You have your little red ribbon pinned right on your shirt from Red Ribbon Week. You get on the bus, you pull out your iPod, you start listening to the playlist that you made specifically for the bus because you don't want kids overhearing the music that you actually listen to, because then they'll call you names. You get home, you turn on Nickelodeon, you try to catch the last little bits of that SpongeBob episode of him becoming a fry cook. Then a commercial starts. The Rugrats video game splashed all over the screen with a little THQ logo at the bottom. And it's got that 2000 style where it's overhyped and exacerbated, where it makes you super pumped up and you're like, Mom, I want to go run the Rugrats game. And somehow, like pulling teeth, you end up eroding your parents' reason, and then you end up going to get Rugrats the video game. You get home, you plop it in, and then THQ plays right in the beginning. And then you get another game. THQ. Another game. THQ. It's something that you don't really think about or really pay attention to as a child, but THQ had a lot of games. And most of the games that had that THQ intro always ended up having to do with the really popular cartoon that you love. Or maybe you love this really cool movie that ended up having a game spinoff. It's almost as if every movie, every cartoon, every show ended up having a spinoff game that had that THQ intro. But the question is, what happened to all of that? I mean, if you search any movie, show, cartoon, or whatever that had a lick of success in the 2000s, you best believe that there is a game based on that movie. Wayne's World, The Mask, Small Soldiers, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Chicken Run, Indiana Jones, Bob the Builder, Jimmy Neutron, SpongeBob, Monsters Incorporated, Lizzie McGuire, Finding Nemo, and I could go on for days at the amount of 2000s games. Not to mention Tack and the Power of Juju. Who even remembers that show? Dragon Ball Evolution. How the hell did they even make a game out of that? The list is so insanely long. And I just want to mention, yes, we are going to be mostly covering THQ, but there is definitely plenty of other gaming companies who did the same idea as THQ. But THQ was kind of the #1 when it came to licensed IPs. They really kind of dominated the game industry of the early 2000s. But again, that really just begs the question, how could a company that made so many games, which a lot of them are just considered classics today, just kind of disappear? I mean, don't get me wrong, the concept of movies, shows, or whatever becoming games still happens today, but it is such a rarity than what it used to be. It used to almost be a requirement that if there's a movie, show, cartoon that did decent at all, there's a 100% chance that a mediocre licensed video game was in the process of being made, and 90% of the time that was THQ. And me personally, I played a lot of these games. Restart the whole game because I didn't type in come. And what brought on this idea is on stream, I started playing a bunch of these old video games that were based on movies and started realizing, holy shit, there are so many of these. And after playing a lot of these games on stream, I really started realizing the similarities between each game and how it's kind of formulaic and really bland a lot of times. It's almost like THQ had a formula, almost like a conveyor belt of video games being made, that they all kind of are pretty similar when it came to gameplay, but with a different package. What's that?
Do I smell stinky? Do I smell stinky poopy? Do you need me to clean up your stinky poopy? Oh boy, that stinky poopy smells pretty bad. It seems like someone needs a little bit of Scentbird. Yes, of course, Scentbird, a fragrance subscription service that we have talked about before that is incredible. Just as Netflix does with the thousands of different titles, so does Scentbird with over 600 different scents that you can get from top-of-the-line brands. And this subscription service is very flexible. You don't want to do a month, just skip right over it, no penalty. And this works for men and women alike. You just choose a new fragrance every single month for 16 bucks. This is Scentbird's fragrances. It has top of the line brands. I'm talking Prada. I'm talking Gucci. I'm talking Versace, baby. With each fragrance, you get a little bit of a 30-day supply. That means you get 30 days to decide whether or not this is the fragrance for you. It's such a nice thing because fragrances can go from $100 to $500 and beyond. You don't want to spend a crap load of money and then end up being like, I'm starting to not like this scent. You can't tell if you love a scent just by sniffing it one time. And on top of that, if you wanted to, you could add 2 or even 3 fragrances each month. So do yourself a favor, stop smelling like stinky poopy doo-doo and use my code Bionicpig3 for 55% off your order. That's $7. $7. Do it.
So we can get some more context as to why this all ended up crashing and burning in the end. Let's figure out where THQ came from. So yeah, games, don't know if you know this, kind of a big deal, especially when it came to the early 2000s. But when things boom and entertainment mediums start picking up some traction, oh boy, you best believe companies be coming in and start finding ways to make money. Let's take it, let's steal it, let's make it into a conveyor belt of industry to pump out as much as possible to make the most amount of money. But there are two ways to sell video games, baby. The first way, which is why I feel like we got so many amazing classic video games back then, is just making a good fucking game. We got Jak and Daxter, Halo, Bioshock, Zelda, Grand Theft Auto, Oblivion, Spyro, Crash Bandicoot. The list goes on for days. You know how it is. The reason these games did so well is the content of the game itself. But there is a different, more, I guess, corrupt way to sell a game. Stealing the IP of something that's already highly recognized by the public. Something really clicked with Big Corpa, and especially when it came to THQ. What if we took these popular shows and movies, these really big IPs that everyone knows and loves, especially children, and make a game out of it?
Well, of course, sire. That's a perfect idea because we don't have to care about the quality of the game itself. We can just make it utterly trash and children will love it. Money.
THQ are actually originally known as Toy Headquarters. Yeah, that came as a surprise to me. I didn't know that's what it meant. Originally was actually solely focused on making toys. You know, buying licensed IPs and making toys out of it. But the CEO named Jack Friedman apparently was kind of no stranger when it came to video games. And a few months after establishing THQ, he ended up acquiring the video game segment of Broader Bund. And apparently this video game company is best known today as a group behind the original Prince of Persia game. And then 1991, THQ released the first of many eventual licensed titles, Peter Pan and the Pirates. It was a side-scroller based on the animated movie of the same title, which also could kind of be riding off the success of the movie Hook that came out the same year. But this kicked off a string of licensed titles that THQ would heavily rely on in the 90s. And not only when it came to games, but toys as well. And after looking at some of the toys they made, boy, all I could say is I'm glad they moved on to video games. So for many years, THQ was really just riding the coattails of IPs. They bought the licensing of the IP, made a shitty video game that appeals to all the children, the younger audience, then they instantly make toys of that same IP, and then they just rank in all the money. $33 million in the first year, in fact. It looked like no one could stop their rise to success. There's no possible way they could fail. But boy, they did. And this was an early failure, actually. They started realizing, oh, hey, making video games kind of cost a lot of money. I mean, let's be real, just buying IPs and making cheap video games does sound like an easy recipe for success, but if you don't do it correctly, you start losing money. And they lost a lot. They ended up losing millions of dollars. Friedman ended up stepping down as a CEO, and in 1995, Brian Farrell took over, and this is where the huge skyrocket of THQ happened. Basically, all the company needed was just a few better business decisions and cheapen up everything, and boom, bam, they sailing. Also, they took that weird asterisk off their THQ logo and made that really cool one that we all know today. And the thing that really pushed THQ into the big leagues is the one that we all know, at least a lot of us all know, is a WWE franchise. I mean, when we think THQ, a lot of people do go to WWE because that is one of their biggest franchises. And apparently they actually had a little bit of a spat when it came to the WWF game with EA. You know, EA being greedy, they were trying to get the WWE stuff, but THQ's like, no, I want the stuff, and they had a little spat, but you know, THQ ended up taking it anyway. You guys know how EA is, all right? We all know. But then the 2000s, baby. This is where the big bang happened. Bazinga. The pinnacle of THQ. I mean, I guess you could say of licensed games in general, but that is why THQ really took off. This is the time of life where if you see a movie or show drop, boy, you best expecting that there be a game out right after it releases. THQ alone between 2000 and 2010 made over 400 games. Yes, I actually counted myself because there's not an actual statistic. I just had to go through the list of games and count every single one. It was annoying. But that's over 40 games a year. I mean, sure, I don't really know how it compares to EA or Sony or any other big company if they compared to them, but still, for a company that is just making licensed video games and a few originals here and there, that's a lot. But in light of their huge success of their licensed bulldozer of a trend, they branched out into making their own games as well. But in that giant conglomerate of licensed video games that they pissed out came some of the most memorable and best games of our childhood. Games like SpongeBob, Battle for Bikini Bottom, the Rugrats video games, the Jimmy Neutron video games, the WWE SmackDown games, Simpson Road Rage, Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights, The Incredibles, Teen Titans, and like I said before, I could go on for days with these games. Honestly, I think people really underestimate how many games THQ had a hand on. I mean, sure, they weren't top sellers, they weren't breaking records, but man, they were kind of classics in a lot of our eyes. But alas, good things always come to an end. Which, I mean, I'm kind of conflicted on calling THQ a good thing, because really at the end of the day, they were just kind of a multi-million-dollar company that leached off of IPs and just made cheap-ass video games where they kind of hit bangers here and there. But you know, I have very fond memories of a lot of THQ games. So yes, I'm very conflicted. But why did licensed video games end? Everybody loved them. Yeah, I know they were cheap, crappy quality games a lot of times, but hey, we all loved them. We all played them. Why is it a rarity now? Why doesn't it happen all the time like it used to? I mean, really, at the end of the day, there are 1,000 reasons why, but I'm gonna break down some of the most important ones, which obviously advance in technology is one of them, and another one, THQ's own hubris. The problem with THQ is, since it started with the mentality of, you know, mockbusters, I guess you could say, by taking titles and leeching off the success without the actual quality, it kind of gave THQ a big head. I mean, they were thinking they were like top of the food chain when it came to gaming, when they really weren't. I mean, yes, they were making shitloads of money and popping out games left and right, but when it came to the quality of the game, a lot of times it sucked. So they started making very bad choices, and it really began with Homefront in 2011. Y'all remember that game? You don't? That's fine, because I didn't really either. It was basically THQ's attempt at combating Call of Duty. And like I said before, the company's not focused on the content of the game or the quality of the game. They're just focused on making the buck, on the end product. You know, they take something that's very good and then kind of leech off that thing, which is exactly what they did with Homefront. So many people were criticizing it for basically copying Call of Duty and stealing a lot of their elements, which, I mean, we could argue all day whether they did or didn't, but knowing THQ and how they work, yeah, they probably did. And the problem about the fact that Homefront failed so miserably is they put a lot of money into Homefront, like more money than they've ever put in a game before type money, and it failed miserably. And after Homefront, they made the biggest mistake in their entire career, something that I've never heard of, and a lot of you probably haven't heard of either, but this is kind of what truly destroyed THQ. Y'all ever heard of the uDraw game tablet? No, what's that, you haven't? Yeah. It was a thing. So right now we're kind of in the boom, the big release of the Wii, which was a huge deal. Motion tracking blew our fucking minds, dude. Wii Sports, honestly, to this day, still consider it one of the funnest games and honestly one of the funnest consoles to ever exist.
Nice car.
But obviously Wii was destined to fail because the obsoleteness that it eventually would turn into. But for some reason, THQ put a shitload of money into making a console extension for the Wii, which is by far the dumbest extension of a console I've ever seen in my life. Like I've said throughout the entire video, THQ loves to just leech off of the success of others. And when it comes to the creative category, boy, THQ is not that good. But it was called the uDraw, and basically it was a trackpad that lets you draw. That's it. You plug in the Wiimote and you draw on a trackpad, which is kind of taking a step back from the technical advances of the Wii at the time and how the hype of motion tracking was there. And then you put it in a non-motion tracking setting. How anyone at THQ ever would have thought this was a good idea is completely beyond me. Apparently, not only were they going for the Wii, they tried to reach out to Sony and Microsoft and add it to the PS3 and Xbox 360, and obviously safe to say that that was a fat no. THQ, no joke, lost about $100 million when it came to the uDraw. They literally had 1.4 million unsold uDraws at the end. You could literally go to eBay and buy it for like $5 now. Like honestly, I went to eBay thinking, oh, that might be a collectible now because it's kind of rare. No, it's not. It's $5. But if we take a step back and look how things were going in the world, you know, the destiny of THQ inevitably was going to fail. They kind of just screwed themselves at the end. At the end of the day, they couldn't keep up with companies like EA, who did make a bunch of licensed video games, but obviously such a huge company, they just moved on and looked at the future, whereas THQ never looked at the future. So let's talk about the other inevitability of THQ and why they failed: the internet and the budget increases of movies. So in the 2000s, we didn't really have endless sources of games like we do now. On the internet, there are just so many different games that no company could really keep up. Sure, we had the internet in the 2000s, but it was nothing like it is now. It's kind of the same idea of like cable companies and Dish Network and stuff, and streaming services like Netflix. Back then, we either had to buy a physical copy of the game, rent it, or do other things to get the game. And that's why the rinse and repeat process of licensed video games works so well, is because it was filtered. We were very limited on the games that we could consume. You know, we didn't have like indie games, indie game developers, or single people who could create an entire game like Among Us, like we do now. And us as kids walking through Blockbuster or Family Video and seeing all the games listed in front of us, and a lot of the times if we see Rugrats, SpongeBob, Jimmy Neutron, we're gonna be stoked that our favorite cartoon characters are in game form and just get it. Same with commercials and television. The games that we were shown were limited and filtered. And if we look at today's climate of entertainment, we kind of threw the big corporations that had a huge stranglehold on what we could consume for a loop. Because like I said before, anyone and everyone can make games. Anyone and everyone can create content. No longer is media filtered through a pipeline of check marks. And since that market of games and media in general has become so oversaturated, including mobile games, which again was another huge killer for THQ, the concept of buying licensed video games that are just subpar, that was made from an IP that you enjoy, it just doesn't work anymore. Long gone is the licensed video game trend, and I don't think it'll ever return unless, I don't know what would happen that would make it come back. And also, like I said in the beginning, movie budgets are huge now. Like buying licensing from a huge IP is insanely expensive now. And since not many people buy licensed video games or care to buy them anymore, and huge companies charge way more than they used to, it's just a vicious cycle that'll end any company into bankruptcy no matter what they do. I guess you could say nowadays has kind of been replaced with battle royales. The only reason to make that comparison is because you can't escape battle royales. Every company still makes them to this day, and I don't know why. But unfortunately, in 2013, THQ shut down and ended up declaring bankruptcy. Honestly, I feel like THQ could have continued if they didn't hold that delusion and get stuck in the past and just move forward. You know, like EA or Sony, I mean, regardless of how greedy they are. They began as a mockbuster knockoff type company, and they never really grew from that. Sure, they made some original games, but I feel like the quality was always lackluster. A sad ending to what a lot of us consider to be a huge part of our childhood. But hey, at least we got battle passes now, am I right? Yeah, you got that sick skin from the battle pass? From the Among Us battle pass? But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and I hope you learned a little something today. If you guys want to watch me play video games, like licensed video games and stuff, I play them occasionally on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/Bionicpig TV. And make sure to tell your friends about me. Yeah.